Hello, today we're at NXTHVN in New Haven, Connecticut in the US, and I'm here with the co-founder, Jason Price. Jason, welcome.
Nice to be here, thank you.
Jason, tell us a little bit about NXTHVN. What is it?
So NXTHVN is a 45,000 square foot building in the Dixwell neighborhood of New Haven. And if anybody knows anything about New Haven, that's where Yale is. But we happen to be in a low income area. And what we've established here is a place for emerging artists to come, have some studio space. We have a proprietary curriculum that we kind of take them through. And then our job is to help connect them to the professional art world, major galleries, names you probably would have heard of if you follow the arts. But then the space is big enough and integrated in a way that we use it as a means to impact our community here, which has historically been underinvested in. So we'll have community gatherings here. We incubate small businesses at times. And it really is our way to kind of build a bridge between parts of New Haven that are thriving and then parts of New Haven that are in need of an influx of new type of capital and innovation.
So you mentioned this is a low-income neighborhood, one that has been underinvested in. Why did you choose this neighborhood?
There's a lot of really good reasons. One is, you do have this sort of divide between, what I would call, thriving neighborhoods and this particular neighborhood, which at one point was thriving. And, there's a lot of truths in this neighborhood that exists in a lot of neighborhoods in America, which is when, manufacturing leaves this neighborhood, it leaves a particular type of demographic in this neighborhood who find themselves, out of work, underskilled, and they just happen to be people of color. And so myself and my partner, we really have a drive and a desire to make sure that if we're going to do something that's supporting the arts, that it really impacts people that we care about and people that we identify. And so that's why it's important for us to be in this neighborhood.
Can you tell us something about this premise? This is a historic building. What was it and what have you guys done to it?
Yeah, so this building is 45,000 square feet. It's actually two buildings that are almost 100, maybe a little bit over 100 years old. One of the buildings was a manufacturer of beakers, the glass beakers that they would sell to the labs over at Yale. On the other side, it was an ice creamery. So they made ice cream here. There was a storefront. What's interesting is when you go around the community, there are some people here who remember when this was open and thriving, and they would come and get ice cream. Wow. But what happened to the building is it fell into a state of disrepair. And there's actually a lot of lawlessness happening in this building. There's some squatters here, fencing of stolen goods and that sort of thing. The government took it back, the city took it back, and then Titus, my partner, and myself, we purchased it. And we started revitalizing it in the architectural design of adaptive reuse. And so what that means is allowing, and I think you can see some of the building here, but allowing a lot of the characteristics of the building that were here originally to kind of shine through. But then we also have these kind of like really nice architectural moments that are kind of like really thoughtful. And so it's this pairing of the new and the old together, which kind of comes up with that concept of architectural reuse. And then just like to add on to your question, as we think about the different areas as we designed it, it really needed to be kind of vertically integrated in a way that sort of mirrors the professional art world. So we have the making space, the studios, we have a gallery here, we're in the gathering space. We have professional studios because we want to retain the artists after they come out of our fellowship program. And then we have some kind of co-working, and then we're in the process of developing a theater, which is a performing arts track. So it's all happening right here.
So when an artist joins NXTHVN as a fellow, what do they get? What is the sort of bundle of services that you guys offer?
So they get a studio, and we think they're very nice studios. They're typically larger than where they came from, because that kind of space is expensive, and the arts kind of happen in big cities where the real estate prices are hard to find. So we feel like we can give them more space, which allows them to kind of go up in scale. What I'm particularly proud of is we give them a new type of curriculum. So they're all very talented, great artists and makers, but we have a unique curriculum which is all about the studio practice and the professional practice of, taking their work and having that work engage with the professional art market, which, by the way, is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And so we think about, what does it mean to be engaged with a gallery that in some cases will take 50% to broker their work to major collectors? How do you think about the documents and the contracts that are necessary? How do you think about boring stuff like paying taxes? For some of these artists, it's the first time that they're receiving cash. And then, they look up and they've got this major tax bill, but they spent all the money, right? So we talk about stuff like that, and then we also talk about, the practice and the canon of making work, but we're also giving them those tools that are really important for having a successful studio practice. And let's be honest, making money, because they are entrepreneurs, even though they're serious artists. And then we also give them a stipend, so we pay them to be here. So each one of them gets $35,000, which can kind of defray the cost of being the starving artist, which we think is important. And we give them an apartment. So we purchased a 7-unit apartment, which is next door to this building. And so they can open their door. When they wake up, they can walk right into their studio and they can be fully immersed in this community and this practice. And then we bridge them to our network. That's the final piece, which are the institutions, the galleries, the brokers, the collectors. And then we encourage them to really make those relationships their own relationships. Because once they understand and they start to build the beginning of their network, that's something that they can take with them and build on once they leave NXTHVN.
Your co-founder, Titus Kaphar, is a very well-known contemporary artist in the US. How did his experience as an artist shape your sense that a place like this was needed, influence the curriculum, really building those business skills for artists?
So that's a really good question about Titus. What you're going to find through this dialogue is it's sort of like the yin and the yang. He's the creative, genius who's the really successful artist in multiple mediums. He just directed and produced and wrote a movie that aired at Sundance. But it's a long journey to get from art school and the love of art to a professional practice, especially at that level. And what happens in that process is that you make a lot of mistakes, and you definitely make a lot of professional mistakes. And so the idea of NXTHVN kind of is a mirror of some of the mistakes he made, and we could build a curriculum around that so that we could give it to emerging artists earlier in their career, so hopefully they can avoid some of those mistakes. So we were talking earlier, ideas about paying taxes when you make money, mistake he made. You talk about ways to engage with galleries and in a way to get to an equitable outcome. He learned that by kind of fits and starts. Even the idea of artists being in one place together, all in pursuit of the same thing, and the collaboration that happens when you sit around and talk. So in art school, it's more like you open the door, you go into the other person's studio. That's part of what we do here. So when you take all of those ideas and experiences, and then you kind of distill them to the essence of what you would need to support makers in the way that we would like to support makers, we come up with something like what we've been talking about. A vertically integrated model and community in support of emerging artists that are trying to take their studio practice to the next level.
And are there implications for the kind of art that the artists produce here if you really want to set them up for professional success?
I think what you're asking me is, I'm going to kind of reverse what you said, which is, are there limitations to what they can do when they're here? There's always limitations around some of the materials they use if they're toxic, and we don't have all of the air handling, equipment that you would need to take some of those fumes out. You're sometimes confined by space. But in terms of the medium, whether it's 3-dimensional or 2D or performative or installations, all of that can happen here, and we have the space for it. To the extent that their practice begins to spill outside of the studio, we build collaborations with, other institutions where they can go into, New York and find the welder that they need to make their work, or, if they want to print in a format that's bigger than what we provide, we have the network where we can include that. But, I would say there aren't too many limitations to what you can do here, other than, if you want to, paint the, 500-foot mural, you got to go someplace else to do that. But for the most part, it can happen here. Yeah.
So why do you believe this combination of art and business has such potential for creating social impact?
It's a loaded question. I think that's an interview in and of itself. But I think, artists are the true innovators. They're the ones who are really taking the chance. They're the ones, in my opinion, that are out on the limb. They're the ones who are proving that new forms of expression and ways of doing things actually have cultural importance. Yeah. And when you think about artists as mavericks and pioneers, typically they are the first ones to come into neighborhoods like the one we're in today, because the real estate is cheap. And then you start to get into stuff like gentrification, who begins to follow them, and then the property values go up. And so, in my opinion, that's a form of entrepreneurism. The challenge, I would say, is how do you marry, what is considered to be pure art and innovation to what we would call, commercial innovation, measured by traditional metrics like net income and return on investment. And I think that's where the science comes in, because, you're taking the theoretical and the practice, and you're trying to mirror it and match it to your balance sheet, the way you raise capital, who are your stakeholders, what you're accountable to in terms of how you deliver the value that people expect. So that's why it's a loaded question, because on one hand, the value of new voices in the arts is critically important, but it's hard to put a real tangible value on it. But the value of having those artists here first, excuse me, and doing the work that we're here with this infrastructure, and then watching, I'm looking around as I'm telling you this, but like buildings going up around us and more investment going into the houses, and people that weren't here or would not come to this neighborhood before, but that will not come here, that's easier to measure. There's more foot traffic, there's more money here now, there's more value in the homes. Our job is then to say, okay, if we're in control of some of that value creation on both sides of that equation, can we put ourselves in the middle of it and ensure that it goes to the people that we care about, or at least some of the people that we care about?
And you guys have been really intentional about building bridges with the community. Can you share a little bit about the apprenticeship program and the role it plays here?
Right, so the apprenticeship program is a program where every single fellow that gets into our program is required to have a high school apprentice. And typically, that is a program for young students who are interested in the arts, or most of the time they're already making their own work. I mean, they're really, really special. I call them kids, but they're usually somewhere between 15 and 18. And those kids come from our neighborhood. They usually come from the type of schools and institutions that don't really have the budget for art. And I think what I've learned is what happens is that those kids who have a desire to create art, they find their people, or they take what they can, but then they never really understand that art can be a pathway to a real career. So our job is, once we have them in our apprenticeship program, is to not only have them learn as an apprentice next to an artist, where, to be honest, like by the end of the program, they end up kind of side by side with the artist in their work, helping them create their work, but also giving them the tools and a different type of curriculum that helps them understand that art is a profession. And so it doesn't matter if they become a maker, or they become a curator, or they become an art historian, that art has real value and it's something that you can go to school for. And a little bit of a brag, I feel very good about what we've been able to do in terms of helping some of these kids go to places where they probably didn't think they could arrive. The kind of schools that are at the top of the food chain when it comes to, arts and education.
You hold an MBA from Harvard Business School. You had a career in finance. You were working in private equity. How is it different working with artists?
was, so our artists, there's some similarities and some differences. So the main difference is, I think the greatest artists, the real artists, are stubborn. And I say that in a good way. They have real conviction around what they're making, their voice. I think they're really intelligent. They take they've studied it. They know the canon. They know who's come before them, and they're building on top of it, and they're coming up with stuff that I could never come up with. And so, working with them is sometimes difficult because you have to find the language to find compromise amongst people who have like real conviction. Yeah. You could say they're stubborn, in a good way. Now, it's very much so related to these pioneers in industry that we study. It's the Steve Jobs of the world that we kind of exalt, yeah. Right? Of having this idea of an iPod that you can fit in your hand, and at that time, that had 500 songs on it, and you can carry it anywhere. And we've read the books, whatever, and it's like he's like, no, it's going to look like this, it's going to be this way, or whatever. And so that's very, very similar, yeah. Right? And I think we're valuing art in a particular way, in the way that it creates a new voice and creates culture. And it forces us to think differently about our human position in society and culture. But business professionals are the exact same way. They're maybe not doing anything new, but it's just enough of a nuance that we begin to move through the world in different kind of ways, and they've created value that makes life easier or more enjoyable, et cetera. And so in that way, it's the same. We just have to find a common language every now and then so that we're not like this all the time.
You guys have plans to incubate local businesses, build out the co-working space. You mentioned a theater, a potential coffee shop. Talk a little bit about what this place might look like a few years from now, and also how you think the pieces fit together.
So hopefully it looks like a small, bustling community with all of those things, and we can build in the interaction between all of those different nodes within the model. And in some ways that's already happening. There's no real wide shot, but you can see that there's offices off to the side of this room. And what we're able to do with that space is we're able to invite entrepreneurs and even nonprofits in to use our space for no money or very little money to get their ideas off the ground and have a place to meet that's in their community. And we've had what I call some round trips, some nonprofits that were in here and they've really hit the ground running, and they come to us and they say, we're out of space, and we're saying, great, congratulations. And then they go take up space someplace else. So just having the building in the style of, people talk creative placemaking. Yeah. The place part is very important, because when you have place with all these different nodes that we have, then we have power. And what that power is really about is the ability to anoint and say, you have a good idea, and I know it's expensive for you to incubate that idea, or maybe you don't know how to incubate that idea. Come to us, spend some time here ruminating on it. And that is a hunch, but I know that is something that could be the key to something versus nothing. So we thought about, to the key of your question is, we thought about the way that everything fit together to be able to support everything you just said. Whether you're a maker, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're somebody who just wants to have an event, whether you want to sit and have coffee and have dialogue with someone, this space is built intentionally to have all of those offerings so that we get to that bustling kind of ecosystem. And in some ways we already have it, but we want more. We always want more.
So what do you think is going to happen when you have entrepreneurs next to artists, artists next to entrepreneurs? I mean, are there real sort of cross-pollination opportunities?
There are, and it's happening. Directly behind you is an office, and it's a graphic design firm, and there is cross-pollination between what they can do from a graphic design point of view and what our artists are doing in terms of marketing their work, thinking about, brand imaging, et cetera, websites, and that sort of thing. So that kind of collaboration is already happening. And then, there's other businesses in here that are more nonprofit oriented where they can begin to think about how does art spill into the community. So let me give you an example. Last summer, we partnered with, and we had a curator do this, John Dennis. He very much is focused on how basketball and art kind of combined. Basketball is a very big part of, kind of some inner city culture, especially in America. And so with this artist, they had a project to revitalize the park that's next door, the basketball court. They got an image, they painted it, they brought out the community painted the courts, they announced it, they dedicated it, they had a dedication ceremony, and they brought in new goals and new nets and that kind of stuff. And so we can say that art has transcended, these four walls into the park to create change for the positive, to revitalize that basketball venue through art. And that all came out of collaboration in this space.
So I'm hearing on the one hand side your efforts to help artists become more successful professionally, be able to get properly paid for the value they create. But on the other hand, community engagement that almost looks like or sounds like democratizing art, democratizing access to art. You're working on these two dimensions at the same time, sort of helping artists get to the very top of their field and at the same time making them more accessible to the general public?
Yeah, so some of that is personal in the sense of philosophically, where do you come out in terms of how you make change in America? Yeah. And I say specifically to America in some ways. And what I mean by that is these artists are engaged and participants in a multi-billion-dollar industry, like I said before. And so historically, there hasn't been enough equity between the institution or the industry and the artists. So, artists get taken advantage of. We understand capitalism. I went to business school. I worked in finance. I understand that there's power in positioning themselves as somebody that's an entrepreneur while they can also be someone who is artistic and really leaning heavily into, that voice. At the same time, I also know that art is a pathway into neighborhoods like this one that are underinvested. And that if we're really good at picking the best and finest artists, and we get 800 applications every year, so it's highly competitive for our 7 slots and 2 curatorial spots, that can be a magnet that then has an impact on everything else that it can touch. So the community, what happens in this building, the collectors who in many cases are very wealthy who come in to collect the work. And again, back to us meaning Titus and myself as co-founders, our ability to take all of those multiple stakeholders with varying levels of intention and bundle it in a way that both the community and our artists get the value that they deserve. And it's a question of, it's a much more philosophical question on who should be doing that work? Should our government be doing that work? Should philanthropy be doing that work? Should the artists be doing the work on their own? We can go down a whole list of ways to make impact, but we believe that art can change the world. And by leading with art at the highest level, that it will attract the capital to be able to make change that lifts everybody.
Can you say something about the business model of NXTHVN? How do you fund this remarkable place?
So NXTHVN is a nonprofit. It's a 501c3. We have money from multiple stakeholders. So both the state and the city, so New Haven, the state of Connecticut. We have money from major philanthropic organizations that you've heard of. I'll name one, I'm gonna leave some of them out, but the ones we know, Mellon, Ford, places like that. We have many sort of high net worth individuals, family offices that are major supporters of the arts. So we use, they've come in and given us, plenty of gifts. And then we have, a large group of individuals that, contribute on a regular basis. And so, that's how we, kind of fund our programming. And I think, but in the building, that's how we built the building. But I think down the road, you really need to endow NXTHVN. You need to have the dry powder to be able to continue the capacity building while you're building and supporting the programs. And that can be difficult. I find it's a nuanced conversation that you have to have with the traditional funders that in some ways there's not a lot of good precedent for having those conversations.
Has being around these amazing artists and in this underdeveloped community changed the way you think about business?
No. I mean, I know. I mean, of course, a little. It's in there. I mean, I'm a different person by being around these people in a good way. But I think, to get really nerdy, we like to nerd out. Return is based on risk. It's a measure of risk. And art is the exact same way. You have to take risk in order to be great. And so, but you don't want to take so much risk that is catastrophic and you're no longer in the game. And I find business is the exact same way. It's about risk mitigation. It's about identifying the problems and making sure that you have a solution for it, whether you're capitalizing your balance sheet with like debt or equity or growth equity or mezzanine capital in between or senior debt or your dad funds you or whatever. But it's all a measure of kind of, can you band the risk? And in banding that risk, can I make a good judgment on the return I'm going to get? Art is the exact same way. If I deviate from the canon to this particular extreme, is it going to put me out of the game? Is it going to put me out of business? So from that perspective, and I know it's like highly like esoteric and philosophical, but I can only approach art through frameworks and the lens that I kind of know and I've kind of grown up on. And so I think about it in terms of risk. How much risk are you willing to take? You can't take none, or you're going to be average. So in my opinion, I look at them the same.
What are 3 leadership traits that you have that you think have served you particularly well as you've put this together?
I think it's like a job interview. This is like a it's like a job interview. No, I know. I think the one thing is I'm intellectually curious. So my friendship with Titus turned into a partnership with Titus, but it really came from the fact that I admired him. And I just asked a lot of questions about what it means to be a professional artist and, who you engaged with. And oh my God, why did they take, this large of a percentage when you work through a gallery? And I think, that sort of desire to, that thirst for like information, like sincere thirst for knowledge and information is something that I think, most leaders, good leaders have. I'm not saying I'm a good leader, but I think it's a good trait. I think the other piece is risk tolerance. The ability to kind of say, I think I know what kind of risk we're taking, and I can kind of band it and get my hands around it, and it's worth taking that step forward. And then I think you really do have to have vision. I think good leaders, and there's more than 3, but because as I said vision, I thought of another one, but I think you have to have I think you have to be able to see this as much more than just a place where artists make work and you can come buy art and see art. And you have to think about this as a place that eventually one day can change a neighborhood, change a New Haven in a way, change the entire art world, or play a part in changing some of what's in the art world, and can extend beyond even North America into Europe and Asia and Africa and some of these. I've left out Australia, and some of these, Antarctica, and some of these places. I think you have to be ambitious in that way. You have to want, that you need that desire to want to be able to I can do this. I think most good leaders have that.
I think it's a great place to leave it. Jason, This is such a great place. You guys have done something truly amazing, and I just hope that more people learn about it, are inspired by it, come and visit, and feel the impact that you guys are creating. Thanks so much.
No, you're welcome. And you're one of my greatest supporters. And so for you to say that means a lot to me. Thank you.